Hi, and thank you for listening to Dream 10X Radio, where we interview people attempting to live extraordinary lives. Our twofold purpose is to both direct and inspire people bold enough to do the same. Dream 10X. Face your fears and make your life count. Hello, Dream 10X. It's your boy, JC.
Dr. Gable.
Trying to add a little energy to this intro.
We've got
Feel
the energy.
Feel the power.
Taste the wine.
Welcome to episode 35 of Dream 10X podcast. How's everybody doing out there? Hope you're doing well. That was a rhetorical question because you can't talk back to us.
That was so funny because I was trying to explain on the cruise to Mom and Dad what a podcast was. Like, it's a radio show. And Dad's like, well, do people call in? I'm like, well, not on ours.
We should have a number.
We should. I think it'd be really cool.
See if anybody would call in.
Yeah,
1-800-DREAM10X.
We should do a live episode
Call
sometime.
in.
Yeah.
What would we talk about with people calling in?
Whatever they wanted to know.
What's your dream? Tell us your dream.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Huh. That's pretty
Kinda
sophisticated
like that.
for us, but I don't know. Let's throw it on the board and see if we can make it happen. What are we talking about today? What's going on? So I'm exhausted, first of all.
Me too.
We are just coming off a vacation, and it was amazing. It was one of the best vacations I've ever had in my life. It was fantastic for a lot of different reasons. And I'm so exhausted because at the end of that vacation, we went to our property, our land in Southern Virginia, and we camped. And for me, it was a chance to relax a little bit more and dream. Mm-hmm. And I like going down there and dreaming about what that place could become one day, and what when we're old and we've lived our lives and we've made an impact on that property down there. What I like to dream about what it would look like, what it could possibly look like, and what we need to do in order to realize those dreams. It's just fun. But at the same time, while I'm doing that, I'm not sleeping. And also I'm listening to the coyotes and the roosters and something attacked our tent with little hands. So like there were these little hands clawing at the tent, and you were sound asleep, and the dog was sound asleep, and I'm like, what in the world is attacking us trying to get in? And then it just grunted in frustration and ran away. I think it was like a possum or a raccoon or something. It couldn't get in the tent. It was like scratching at the tent. And it just growled and walked away.
Hilarious.
Scared the crap out of me. That's the real reason I couldn't sleep, is because I'm wondering, thinking in my head, what else is out there that's going to try to get into the tent? So, but before last weekend, where did we go? You tell us. So
We went to Maine.
Maine. We
Yes.
took, your parents took us on a cruise up the coast and down the coast of Maine. Well, it was mostly... Yeah, it was up
We
the
went
coast.
up and then down. Yeah.
So what were some of the ports of call that we stopped at?
Oh, shoot. Bar Harbor. Bahaba, Portland, Belfast, Bath.
Bath, yes.
Bath, yes. We skipped Booth Bay because of the weather.
Oh, good memory. I didn't remember all that.
Yeah.
Castine.
Castine, right?
I loved Castine.
Yeah, Castine was awesome.
And Castine is kind of where the adventure really started for me on this cruise. Like,
oh, yeah?
I didn't know what to expect. I've never been on a cruise like this before. It's not one of those big cruise lines. It's a small cruise vessel. And I had never been on anything like that before, so I didn't really know what to expect. And I've never done a coastal cruise like this. So Castine is kind of where the adventure sprung to life, kind of, for me, or at least the exciting part of the vacation sprung to life for me. So me and your sister decided to go take a walk in Castine. So we took the tender from the so our vessel was anchored off out in the bay.
Yeah.
And we took a tender into Castine, and we just walked around. And it's a very quaint little town, very, very Maine.
Yes.
It was a very foggy morning.
I loved it.
A little bit cool. And then it warmed up when we started walking around. But
Yeah.
as we're coming into shore on the tender, there's this huge vessel. There's lots of pounding going on, and it looks like a big commercial vessel, but it turns out it's a vessel owned by the Maine Maritime Academy there. Didn't know anything about. I had no idea what was going on. I just saw this big boat, and then I started learning as we're going more about what's going on there. And the Maine Maritime Academy is there, and they use this big metal vessel as part of the training for whatever they do. And there were some cadets in boats wandering around in the bay. I don't know, doing whatever. And then there was another vessel called the Bowden, which is an 88-foot schooner, and it was docked right there next to this big metal, I don't know what you call that shit. Big. It wasn't a container ship, but it's a big metal vessel, whatever it was, And so the Bowden is a really beautiful schooner.
It was gorgeous, yeah.
And it kind of, did I see the Tabor Boy in Tabor?
Yeah.
The Tabor?
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that a little bit. Castine was a quaint little town. Started to become aware of the maritime significance of that spot, and then we walked around and we had lobster. You bought us lobster rolls, and very wonderful but extremely expensive.
Surprisingly for me.
Yeah, 2 lobster rolls were like what, $70?
Yeah, 2 lobster rolls and Karen's ice cream was $70.
That's like jaw-dropping expensive. I couldn't believe
Karen
it.
ate some expensive ice cream too. Yeah, and so I went to Maine as a kid, and lobster was like $1, and all you can eat. Like, it was insane. So kind of crazy that it was that expensive.
I was really surprised, so I was glad you bought that for me. Thank you very much. It was really good. So anyway, we got on the boat and we went to the next port. I don't remember exactly where we went after that. I don't know if that was Bar Harbor. No, we were coming from Bar Harbor.
I don't remember after Castine.
Bar Harbor was cool too. A lot of big yachts.
Yeah.
One of the yachts that was in the harbor there at Bahaba was the vessel, the super yacht called Dream, which I thought was really great.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to say, hey, Captain, you need to call it Dream 10X. Why just Dream? That's kind of lame. Beautiful vessel. I looked it up online, and I guess it's for hire. So if you got enough money, it didn't say how much it cost, and it didn't say how to contact them directly. You contact your yacht dealer. It must cost a pretty penny to use that yacht. But anyway, it was out there in the bay, and I was reading a book at the time, and I was like, this is really pretty cool. I wonder what it would be like to have the means to sail, to go out on a vessel like that, just to lease it for a week or a month or whatever, and have your family on there and have a great time in a big vessel like that.
Yeah.
So I got to dream a little bit about that. So then we end up in Rockland.
Yeah.
A lot of sailing vessels there. So we're docked, but there are hundreds of sailing vessels on moorings all out in the bay, and lobster pots everywhere. And I'm like, I don't know how lobster pots aren't getting like tangled up in everybody's keels and rotor and motors and stuff. I couldn't figure it out, and apparently it happens a lot. And I guess the lobstermen get mad if they find their lobster pot in your in your what do you call the spinny thing in the back of
the propeller?
The propeller, yeah, the propeller. But our ship just seemed to go right through them. Like lobster pots are everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't see a way to navigate in between them at all.
They're supposed to. I heard from another passenger who asked the same question that there was supposed to be a channel. And
I never saw it.
I never saw it. No, I didn't. But there's supposed to be a channel, and but it's pretty narrow, so he had to have gone over them.
Yeah, I mean, even when you're going out to sea, those things are just everywhere. Lobster is a huge business there.
Yeah,
amazing.
And most people have personal pots. It seems like, because they were all the ones closer to shore, and he said the commercial ones are pretty far out.
We did go out on a lobster boat and saw how we saw how the lobstermen do their thing, how they push over the trap, and how they put the bait in the trap, and how they pull it up, and how the lobster gets trapped and everything. It was really really cool.
The difference between male and female lobsters, the difference in their claws. Apparently they have 2 different claws. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And they grow them back too.
Yeah.
If you break them off, they grow them back. really fascinating.
Yeah.
And what size, how they determine the correct size to keep, and how you notch the female lobster if it has eggs. So, right? If it has eggs, you notch the tail.
Yep.
Something
And if it's a fertile female and she has a notch at any point, then she stays notched the rest of her life. So if her fin falls off and they see it used to have a notch on, they'll put one there, and then she gets to live.
Yeah, so
it's like
great.
Handmaid's Tale for lobsters.
Goofy. So great sustainability practices there amongst the state of Maine for lobstering. But there's so many lobster pots, so they're just everywhere. It was just incredible to me. And each lobsterman has a unique lobster buoy, a color, to uniquely identify their lobster pots. And you can have a personal license for lobstering, but you can only have five lobsters per family.
5 lobster pots per family.
Oh, 5 lobster pots. Well, I thought you could only
person.
have like 4 lobsters per family or something like that. There's a limit to the number of lobsters you could have.
Yeah, I thought it was 5 lobster pots, and then and then you can fish it as much as you want to.
And then if you're commercial, there's like 500 or something like that. Something crazy. I just found the whole industry very fascinating.
Totally.
So that aside, just talking a little bit about our wonderful experience there in Maine. But the thing that really started to intrigue me is when we went to a lobster boil. And beautiful day, thankfully. There was no rain, no fog, no anything. Nice warm sunny day. And there was a big tent set out, and there were these huge pots with seaweed and water, and they were sitting on top of a fire. And there was a guy throwing some kind of hardwood. I think, what did he tell me? I think it was oak. I think he was using oak, and he was just throwing it on the fire, and the fire was underneath these pots. And lobster was in the salt water that was in these pots. They were just like aluminum. What do you call those tubs? Aluminum tubs. Those bathtubs.
Yeah.
Whatever. Salt water, lobsters in them.
Like a wash tub.
With lots of seaweed on top. And then they put some wet burlap, it looks like, on top of that. And they cooked the lobsters, I guess, for about an hour or something. And then they took all of that off, and then they poured the lobsters out on top of the seaweed, and they were like bright red and just really beautiful.
Beautiful presentation.
Yeah, really pretty. So we're sitting there stuffing our face with lobster, right? And corn on the cob, and
sweetest corn I've ever had.
Oh, so good. I didn't even put butter on it.
No,
it
me
was
neither.
So good. Did you find out how they cook that corn?
Yeah, so they put the lobsters in, and then they put the corn on top, and then the seaweed, and then the burlap. And so the lady said it's just regular corn that grows in the area. It's not any sweeter than any other corn, but cooking it in the seaweed or in that salt water in the husk made a significant difference.
Yeah, it was fantastic. This is the best corn I ever had.
Yeah, me too.
I always put butter on my corn, but I'm like, this is so good.
There's no point. Yeah.
What else did we? Mussels. There were mussels.
Oh my God, the mussels were perfect.
Corn
I'm drooling again.
Yeah. All the lobster you could eat, just bright red lobster.
Yeah.
The only lobster I've ever had was at Red Lobster. And
oh, seriously?
That was years ago.
Completely different experience.
This was fantastic.
Yeah.
Just fantastic. So I'm having one of the best seafood meals I've ever had in my life. It's fresh lobster right out of the bay, corn on the cob, unbelievable, mussels. I think we had like potato salad and some other stuff. And so this lobsterman comes over to me. She was a woman, but in Maine they call her lobsterman. She comes up because she was one of the ones cooking the lobster.
Yeah.
She comes up to me and she starts talking to me about how she and her husband sailed, spent time on a boat,
houseboat,
for 10 years in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Houseboat, not a sailing vessel, narrowboat.
Yeah.
It was out of the blue for me. Like I'm trying to figure out how to get the meat out of my crab or my lobster, and all of a sudden this lady's telling me about how she spent 10 years with her husband tooling around Europe, and I'm like, well, this is totally random, but I'm fascinated. Tell me more,
Yeah.
So she's telling, I'm like, who are you? And she's like, oh, my name is Meg, and I'm like, okay, who are you? She's like, the captain is my husband, and he owns this maritime museum, and you should go in there and look around if you're interested. And I'm like, oh, definitely. And she's like, yeah, we have a book about our time traveling on a boat around Europe for 10 years. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I got to pick this up. And yeah, she's like, yeah, it's in the museum. Please stop by. We'd love you to go in there. I was like, absolutely. And let me backpedal a little bit. So she told me who her husband was. I knew immediately who that was because there was this old guy up at the front before we could start eating. He had a lobster called Luigi up front. And
the Italian lobster, he said.
Italian lobster Luigi. And he's the one who told us when we could go eat. And I'm like, forget about it. I'm trying to figure out how to open the lobster here. So I'm not even listening to him. He's up there with his lobster, and it's just all kinds of hilarity, And I'm like, what the heck? And he's got the lobster standing upside down. It's apparently the lobster knows ballet, and he's got it standing upside down on his tail, and it's blowing bubbles out of its mouth. And I'm like, what the? This guy's crazy. I'm thinking, who is this guy? He's crazy. So we finally get invited to go up and get our plates and everything. And I go by the Luigi the lobster, and it's a real lobster. And it's really blowing bubbles out of its mouth. And I'm like, this is crazy. So that was Captain Sharp. Captain Sharp is the purveyor of the whole lobster bake and the Maritime Museum and all. And I had no clue. I'm like, okay, whatever. Just give me some lobster, dude. I'm hungry. But then when I talked to Meg, I put two and two together. They're married, and they run the whole thing, and they're the ones who spent together 10 years in Europe. And holy cow, he's a mariner bar second to none, probably. I have never met a mariner like him before.
Yeah.
And so after we're done eating and gorging and had a great meal, just our family and maybe a couple of other people, everybody else had left. I don't know where they went. And we stayed behind to go to the museum. So we go in the museum, and there Captain Sharp is in there. And we're just looking around. And I had, no idea what we're going to find. But I was definitely looking for the book. I thought it was one book that Meg had mentioned. And Captain Sharp is in there talking. And all of a sudden, he says, and if you're interested to hear about the Bowden, please follow me. And I'm like, well, we just saw the Bowden in Castine. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go listen to him. So I follow him. He's, on a cane. He's 88 years old. Mm-hmm. And he's walking down the hallway very slowly, and I'm just following him. And I'm the only one following him. And we go into this room, and there's a model of the Bowden in the center of the room, and then there's all this paraphernalia, old pictures of Admiral Macmillan in the Arctic, and a narwhal tusk, and a sawed-off shotgun, which is part of the story, and all this crazy paraphernalia in this one little room. I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. So I'm standing there, and he's like, well, I guess nobody but you is interested in hearing about the Bowden. I was like, well, we'll give him a few more minutes to wander down here. So I'm just like looking around, and then a couple more people come in there, but not a lot. And I'm not expecting anything at all, really. But all of a sudden, he starts telling the story about the Bowden that's slowly but surely drawing me in. Mm-hmm. And it turns out the Bowden was an 88-foot schooner built, I think it was in the 1800s or something like that. And it was used by Admiral Macmillan to run scientific expeditions above the Arctic Circle. Oh, wow. And it made over 26 voyages up there. And they got locked in the ice up there. And, I forget the other guys, the other adventurers' names who, went up to Antarctica and stuff like that. But it sounded just like Ernest Shackleton. Ernest Shackleton, so yes. So he and his crew got locked in the ice. And so Admiral Macmillan's adventure reminded me a lot of Ernest Shackleton. Admiral Macmillan did a lot of good for the Inuit people up there. He took a schoolhouse up there and in one of the expeditions, and just fascinating story. And then once those trips were done and he was getting old, he decided to donate the Bowden, the 88-foot schooner, to Mystic Seaport. So Mystic Seaport took her in and basically just put her to the side, took her mast off, took the engine out, and just left her alone for a long time. And basically she was just neglected and didn't do anything with her, and she just started falling into a state of disrepair. And then at some point in his older age, I think he was in his 90s, Admiral Macmillan started saying, hey, Mystic, please, you can't. I donated this vessel to you, but I would like you to fix her up. You know, keep her running, not just put her in a state of disrepair. And at that point, Captain Sharp heard about this whole thing, and Captain Sharp, if reading his book, so I found out about his other book called "With Reckless Abandon" in his museum, and quickly bought it and read it. But in his book, he talks about how much of a boat lover he is, and that resonated with me a whole lot in his love for boats. And when he heard about the disrepair of that Bowden had fallen into, he called up the admiral and said, "Hey, would you be willing to give her to me? And I promise to fix her up and take care of her for you." And McMillan said, "Yeah, sure. Please do. Mystic's not doing anything with her." And so he went down there and he picked her up and towed her up. And so he's telling us this story in this museum. And I was just slowly but surely getting drawn in. I'm like, this is crazy. We just saw the Bowden in Castine. And here he is telling me the story about how he took the Bowden himself and he fixed it up.
Wow.
And he made her seaworthy again. And part of his story was he needed a new mast for her. And the mast needed to be 12 inches diameter and 75 feet long. He needed to find a piece of spruce that was that big. And I'm like, where would you ever find something like that? But I guess in Maine, in the shipbuilding world, people know how to find these types of spars. So he actually found a company that had one that fit the bill out of Donkey Deadwater, Maine.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
It's great. It's such a great name, Donkey Deadwater, Maine. And he tells a story about how he got this piece of spruce, and it's just a big long piece of wood at that point, right? So, and he talks about the steps for making a perfectly round cylinder spar.
Whoa!
So the first step you do is you square it off, you make it square.
Yeah.
And then you cut it into eighths, so you have 8 sides. And then you make 16s, and then you make 32s.
No way.
And then once you have 32, you've got it into 32 sides. Just like any idiot can make it a cylinder that way.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant.
So that's how you turn it. So anyway, that's how he made the spar.
Yeah.
And it was the people that he was working with round. And they got a crane and they stepped it up and took care of the mast and redid the engine and fixed her all up. And then this is the other great part. There came a time where they wanted to show the admiral the work that they had done on the vessel. So October 17th, 1969, he and his crew sailed the Bowden from Maine down to Provincetown, Massachusetts.
Woo!
We know Provincetown.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Because that's where we got towed in on our ocean rowing mishap.
Yes, we did.
We got towed in to Provincetown, Massachusetts, so we know that area pretty well from a nautical perspective or whatever. So anyway, he sails the Bowden down with his crew down to Cape Cod, and the fog sets in. And this is before GPS, radar, any of that. So they don't know where they are when they get down to the Cape. And the way he told the story was he and his crew came in there and they found a buoy that pointed so that they could vector off of to shore. And as soon as they found the buoy, the fog cleared a channel. And right at the end of that channel was Admiral McMillan's house, and he's sitting on the deck. He's sitting on the deck with a bell, ringing his bell to help them find their way.
No way.
To the dock in P-Town.
Holy
So
cow.
I'm sitting there listening to the story, and I'm like, this is amazing. This guy, this is a character beyond. He's a gem. This guy is gold. Like he's got some experiences behind him. And so I was really, really just taken in by this guy and Captain Sharp. And so anyway, the rest of the story is they pulled into the dock and Admiral McMillan came out and they cheered and yay, you did a great job on my boat. Come over to my house and I'll show you a bunch of old movies of the Arctic.
Oh my
and that trip's
gosh.
up there. So they go over to his house and they get these old reel-to-reel movies and
Wow.
these black and white movies of the Arctic and all that. And so I thanked Captain Sharp. This is really great because we just saw the boat in a day or two ago in Castine, and it's great to hear that story, make that connection. I was really touched by that, and it's just really beautiful. Like, it's not often you go on a vacation and experience something so monumental, so touching. I was really touched there. So I bought all his books, or you bought me all his books, I should say. And the one that I just finished reading is called "With Reckless Abandon: Memoirs of a Boat-Obsessed Life" by Captain Jim Sharp, and he's the purveyor there at the Sail, Power, and Steam Museum, and I thought it was Camden, but this is Rockland, Maine. Anyway, it's the same kind of area, Rockland, Maine.
It's
Camden,
like right
Maine.
next door, I think.
Yeah. And so my intersection with Captain Jim Sharp started at the end of this book. And I just want to read you the very last paragraph of this book, and because this is where I intersect with him. He says, "If you journey to Maine, you must stop for a look at the Sail, Power, and Steam Museum of South Rockland. Come in, set a spell, I'll spin you a yarn, maybe two, and you may go home a bit more nautical than you came."
I love it.
Absolutely true. We had lobster and went into the museum and found this book, and this book is fantastic. I just loved it. Not only because of the nautical yarns that he tells throughout the book, and his infectious love of all thing wooden boats and tugboats. He was a tugboat captain as well, and but also to kind of part of what Dream 10X is all about is to kind of study the arc of other successful individuals' lives, and to see, are there pieces of that we could incorporate in our own lives as we move forward and try to become successful ourselves. And he definitely has a lot to emulate in this book. So real quick, just a little bit about his book. So the story about the Bowdoin is also in here, which is the reason I wanted the book, because I wanted to read more about that. But turns out that Admiral Macmillan has a bunch of books about his adventures too, and I'm very interested in reading about that. But there's a quote here I wanted to read about that, how he enters into Provincetown. He calls it P-Town on the Bowdoin. He says, "Groping our way into P-Town Harbor, blaring away on the noisy old hand-operated foghorn, searching blindly for something to recognize, we finally found a buoy and squared away for Macmillan's house on the beach. The Lord blessed us because just before our time ran out, the fog, like a curtain, rolled back, and there was Captain Mac, perched prominently on his porch, blowing his horn." Okay, blowing his horn, not ringing a bell. "Back at us. We jibed her over, saluted him, and ran down the beach for the public dock where Mac came down to help us tie up."
That is so amazing.
It's a great story.
Wow.
Yeah, I just love that. It just gives me chills to read that. I mean, the fact that he, took over the man's boat and brought it back to life for him before he died.
Yeah.
So Admiral Macmillan was in his 90s then.
Yeah.
And so Admiral Macmillan could then, die knowing that his boat came back to life.
Yes.
And not only did the boat come back to life, the story of the Bowdoin is amazing. It got stuck in this tug of war between other competing parties and ended up becoming the state vessel of Maine. And that's why it's docked in Castine, because it's used by the Maine Maritime Academy there now.
To teach them how to sail.
It's fully alive. It's still beautiful. It's still in use,
Yep.
and it's being put to good use there at the Maine Maritime Academy. And that just makes me cry almost. It's a wonderful story. I mean, what a great impact his life had on so many other people, just because of that one thing where he offered to take over that boat and bring it back to life. So yeah, I really love that story. But anyway, just to kind of summarize his career arc, he runs a successful schooner business there in Camden, and he ends up buying. Let me back up a little bit. He starts off as a young guy. His dad runs a finance company, in Philadelphia or in the Pennsylvania area. I think it's Philadelphia. And it's called the Terminal Finance Company, which I think is so
That is funny.
Terminal Finance Company, because of its proximity to a bus terminal in the area.
Okay.
So that's why it's called that. So that's how he gets his career start. He goes to college, but I don't think he finishes. And his dad says, "Hey, I need your help." His dad gets sick, and he's like, "Hey, I need your help running my company. So will you come help me run it?" So he comes in, he starts helping. Doesn't know anything about finance really, other than what his dad teaches him. But there's no details about how he actually runs the company. But generally speaking, what he does is has the secretary, there's 2 secretaries at the company, he basically has them run it while he goes off and learns how to be a schooner captain.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that right there is genius. He's got this company, it's basically running itself. Well, the 2 secretaries are running it, so it's basically on autopilot. It's making money. He goes down to Florida to figure out how to learn to be a schooner captain. He fakes his way onto a schooner by saying that he knows he's a sailmaker, when he really wasn't. While at the same time, he applied to be a schooner captain down in the Bahamas.
Oh, smart.
So this actually gets him in trouble because he gets found out by the schooner owner who realizes, hey, you're a liar. You're not really a sailmaker, and you've applied to be a schooner captain yourself while working on my schooner. So he gets in trouble, and he loses both jobs, and he's like, okay, but whatever. I learned how to sail schooners, so he's good. So he ultimately ends up in Maine. He ends up with a fleet of schooners. He's successful. He has a wharf there. He's got his own dock. He's got at least two vessels. One called the Roseway and one called Adventure. Both they sound like wonderful schooners that he takes people out on. And he talks a lot about his running that business and the people that come through and the experiences that he has. And it's just really, really entertaining book. There's not many books that I've read recently that make me laugh out loud. But this book is real.
It was really fun to watch him read the book.
His sense of humor is, I mean, this guy, he's a gem. This is you don't find characters like this in America much anymore. So I was really glad to run into him. He's a real character. He just a really funny sense of humor. He buys a crane, right? He needs a crane to set this tugboat that he's turning into a restaurant. He needs to put it on shore. You need heavy equipment from time to time to do stuff. We know this from our land. You need equipment you need bulldozers and stuff to do things. He needed a crane to do what he needed to do. So he bought this old broken down crane. He called it Ichabod.
That's brilliant.
Ichabod crane.
That's brilliant. Yep.
Kill Ichabod.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's stuff like that throughout the book. I'm just cracking up. Like, man, how does he think of this stuff? So yeah, he runs a restaurant out of his wharf. He's got these schooners. He builds apartments at his wharf, and so he's renting out. So he's got income from his rentals.
So multiple streams to really do what he wants to do. That's really smart.
He's writing these. He wrote these books. There came a point though where he had to sell the Terminal Finance Company because it kept getting broken into, Finally, the secretaries got robbed at gunpoint.
Oh my God.
And they said, "We're out. Peace out."
Yeah.
So he's like, "Okay, let's sell the business." And, so that's why he parted ways with that. But so it's interesting to see what he did, like how he got these multiple streams of income, and he built on them. They all kind of intersected. So the restaurant was there on the wharf. He used his sister to run the restaurant, and he had another restaurant that ran inside of an old tugboat that he acquired, and his sister ran that as well. And Walter Cronkite, another bunch of people used to go there, frequent that because it was a really popular restaurant. Books. He was a tugboat operator too, so lots of income, lots of income streams coming in, and that allowed him to head out with his third wife Meg, and go over to Europe and travel around for 10 years in a small boat. throughout Europe, and that's how I learned about him, is talking to Meg about this adventure. And I very fascinating how that was the conversation that brought me to this information about him. Mm-hmm. So it's multiple streams of income was basically the root of that, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
But now I know it.
Yeah, multiple streams of incomes to enable you to do what you want to do.
Yeah. And how he did that.
Yeah. And doing things you love.
In this book. It's not a book about business. It's not a book about that. It's a book about sailing adventures.
Yeah.
But while you're entranced with all his different boats and his different sailing adventures, you learn that, he was able to do this because of how he structured his financial life.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I freaking love about this book, is that it's not front and center. It's like, by the way, this is what I had going on, but check out this boat. This boat is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It went to the Arctic, and life is the adventure, not the. You got to do the money, but you got to figure out your money. That's important in order to live your life. Mm-hmm. But the life is what's really important.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this book, and I love about him. It's the life that's important.
Yeah.
So then he ended up retiring and doing that, and didn't want to be a landlord anymore, so sold all that. But then at the age of 75, I think 77. Saw another piece of property in Maine, which was the museum, which is what the museum is sitting on now, and all of that stuff, and where the lobster bake and all that stuff was going on. That's what he acquired at age 75 or 77 to come out of retirement, and he still wanted to do all that.
Yeah.
So he built it all out again right there. Wow. Where we were having the lobster bake, and so he's still doing that. And he loves telling people stories at the museum. And
I didn't get to go through them. I got to go through the museum. I didn't get to hear his stories, unfortunately, because I was hanging out with my parents, and they move a little slower. But we went to some of the rooms, and just this collection of ship's tools was unbelievable. It was really cool. And Dad was in the Merchant Marine Academy, and also was a sailor, and so it was really cool to hear my dad talk about, that's a this, and that's a that, and that's a this, and this is when I use that tool on the ship. And so it was cool, like, for just a personal perspective from like the Way family to hear Dad reminiscing on his life. So I wish those two had talked, because that would have been brilliant.
Well, your dad was sitting outside the room when Captain Sharp was talking about boating, so I think he heard a little bit of that. But.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you, Captain Sharp, for sharing your story. I just love the adventure and your sense of humor, and I love how you're living your life with reckless abandon, and I definitely want to...
It's very inspiring.
Very inspiring, yeah, and just a pleasure meeting Meg, his wife, and to hear how they travel throughout. So they have some other books too that I'd like to read at some point. One's called A Kaleidoscope of Cruises, about their their cruises throughout Europe.
That's what I'm reading next.
And another one called There's Magic Beyond the Bend, also about their, I think it's a boat they bought in Amsterdam. Apparently, there's more boats in Belgium than there are people. And
really?
I didn't. That was something he said in this book. I didn't realize that.
That is cool.
It sounds like Belgium is quite a nautical society as well. For some reason, I love mariners and sailors, because they seem to have so much. They're different. They're different people. I can't put my finger on it, but they're characters. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is, but I think people, communities and cultures who know how to sail have historically dominated the world.
Yep.
When you think about the Dutch and the British, and to some extent Americans, some part. Maine, definitely a nautical society. Absolutely. And so I really enjoyed that about Maine. Maybe Florida to some extent. Annapolis, definitely in Chesapeake Bay area, you'll find that. So I have a place in my heart for sailors.
Yeah.
What?
I was in the Navy for 7 years, so technically I was a sailor, so in theory.
Obviously. Which is also exemplified in episode 14 of Dream 10X, where we talked to
Jim Brown.
Jim Brown, who is an naval architect and multi-hull pioneer. And so don't miss that episode. He can tell a story like...
he tells
but
some
Jim
great
Sharp,
stories.
He's got him in the running for storytelling.
We need to get them on a podcast together.
But yeah, Jim Brown, I love talking to him. He can tell some stories too. And then Nick Jaffe, who's a younger Australian sailor from Australia, in episode 11. Also, those are some of my favorite podcasts. And so, anyway, I hope my enthusiasm for Maine mariners, and especially Captain Sharp and his museum and all the lobstermen out there.
Yep.
Really loved it. If you get a chance to read With Reckless Abandon, I highly recommend it. Captain Jim Sharp. If you get a chance to go up to Maine and tour around and see how the lobster industry works, highly recommend it. It's great. Beautiful place up there.
And definitely check out the museum.
Definitely check out the museum. I forgot the name. Let me look it up real quick. It's called the Sail, Power, and Steam Museum at 75 Mechanic Street, Rockland, Maine. And the stuff that's in the museum is interesting, but you really want to corner Captain Sharp and have him tell you a story, because he's got some good ones.
Awesome.
So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Over and out.
Good night.